Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Donatas Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith, where we make free pastoral outreach to individuals and families in crisis by offering the spiritual works of mercy. And this is the Our Lady, Our Mother podcast series. This one will be aired in March of 2026. And I want to thank my co host, Carlos Solorzano, who is also our board member, for being my co host for this podcast. Carlos, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I always like to do a little introduction on you because some people have been to the podcast before. They are regular listeners, but we always have new people. So I thought maybe just, give us your bio, a little bit about you would be great.
Well, I am married with two, I'm actually going to say grown children. They're 23 and 19, so I guess legally grown, but the discussion of when you become an adult is obviously ongoing. So doing well. I work as a full-time theology teacher at South Point Catholic High School in Tucson, Arizona. Aside from that, I also am involved with music. I do perform part-time, if you will, and I've actually gotten involved in this past 2025 with film work. I've been doing some acting in the Arizona film scene, both in the Tucson area as well as Phoenix, and it's been exciting because it actually, besides just the creative challenge, it also you have to get into the head of the character. And I have found that it's really taught me to have a better understanding of people. And to give you an idea of how impactful it's been to me, the last role I played, I actually played a migrant that was arrested by Border Patrol. And I had to actually be on my knees in the desert as if I were arrested. And it was interesting because the way the scenes were shot, we had to do it, we had to be on our knees with our hands behind our back for quite a while. So the physical strain of that was really was a lesson. And it was interesting to me because in the scene there were times where there'd be Border Patrol agents and other people present, and I kind of got the sense of what the humiliation factor would be in that sense. Now, and I'm speaking all of this on the human level. I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, but and thinking of why they would, travel to another country, why they would, seek a better life and be so desperate to do it. So it gave me a lot to process just driving home from the shoot. And I'm really glad I did it.
You and I are connected on social media. So of course I saw some of the pictures and I'm always amazed at some of the really interesting things that you do aside from your teaching.
Hmm.
And I know you get to meet a lot of great people too, and you get to form, new friendships, relationships with others, and
Hmm.
really be able to use your gifts and talents. So, thanks so much for sharing that with us. And we're real grateful too that you're part of our board and our mission.
Thank you.
And the fact that you and I are doing this podcast series for families in crisis, I also appreciate because then it's our way of helping others. It's our way of making outreach. And so, this topic for this particular podcast is on people who experience job loss, career change, transition in that respect. I think we all have gone through that in our lives at some way, shape, or form, even if it was just at the very beginning of our careers. I know that I
Hmm.
went through that when I was younger at one point and even was a stay-at-home mom for quite a while and then got back into the workforce. So we're all on a different journey, and job loss, career change, it really does affect family life, especially if it affects your income level and things like that. So, I thought what we could do with this podcast, Carlos, is share your experience. I know that you are a teacher, you're also a person who gets to talk to a lot of parents and families who are going through things, people who are going through all kinds of challenges, and I'm sure you know that job loss is one of those. So just share with us any experiences that you'd like to share that might help some of our listeners.
Well, my if anyone's listened to previous podcasts, they would have heard me say I work at a different school and last year. I went back to a school I used to work at for 10 years. And while that was, transitioning from one school to another and going to a school I was familiar with was good too. There was still that level of anxiety that I did feel like, how much has it changed? How much have I changed? Because I was away from that school for 8 years. So that was certainly something I prayed about. And I'm sitting here saying I did feel a little bit of anxiety over that, but it wasn't from, say, job loss. I mean, I had made the decision to leave one place to another to go to another. And I know in a lot of cases from friends of mine to sometimes, as you brought up, I get to meet families. You have situations where people have lost their jobs, for whatever reason. They were fired or laid off, whatever. I've been in that position too when I was younger. And it's never easy. That sense of the unknown is always it creates stress. I mean, for me, it was interesting because when I, did the interview and I felt it went well and in my gut, I felt like, okay, they're going to have me back. But I was just waiting and waiting and, I would try to go to sleep at night and just, I wanted to get this finalized. So there were times I was feeling a little tense. And then even when they sent the email and they said, we want to have you come back, I wasn't, I'm the kind of person like, not till I sign that paper do I believe it. And, what I did want to share that I thought would be interesting for this is a couple of days ago, I was watching a video and it was about some archaeological ruins in Judea. And it was near Nazareth. So they were talking about how this is probably a place where Joseph and possibly Jesus worked. Because we see those paintings of Joseph and Jesus in the carpenter shop, which some of them I absolutely love them. I think they're wonderful. But the carpenters would also be contracted to go work on other projects around the area, and sometimes there's been some films who've done a great job where the writer and director take liberties where they show Joseph and Jesus working somewhere else. Like we've talked about my book, I Am His Mother, and I mentioned one of the Jesus movies where Jeremy Sisto, the actor, plays Christ. And I had talked about how that film inspired me to write the book. But one of the things I've never mentioned from the story is one of the early scenes in the story has Joseph and Jesus, they're out of town working. And they have to walk home. Mary's home by herself. And it's a very human situation because while Joseph and Jesus are away, they had wrote a scene where the Romans come to collect taxes, and they actually are pretty aggressive with our Blessed Mother to the point where they take their goat and a few other things to, because they were not rich, they were poor people, so that means they also struggled to make ends meet, and she, would have, you know you see their frustration when Joseph comes home. He's very angry that they took some of their property and that they were aggressive with her while he was gone. But him and Jesus were away because they had to work. And so a lot of the stresses that we experience from job changes, job loss, or just the struggling to maintain the lives we have, they've gone through that. And see, that's the beauty of our God and then also the saints and our Blessed Mother that intercede for us, that Jesus worked. Jesus has gone through this stuff. He would have, I'm sure even when he was on his ministry, when, they had to eat, they had to, if he would have, say, damaged one of his sandals, he'd have to replace it. I mean, St. Paul, he was a tent maker and we know from his letters, he didn't take money for his ministry. He worked to earn his keep. So even a faith-filled person has the reality of work. I mean, Genesis talks about, Adam having to, earn from the sweat of his brow. So many times we're willing to do the work, but we have to have the opportunity to work as well. And that can be very stressful when there's no opportunities to earn a living.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that reflection I think when we integrate our faith into any situation that we're going through, whatever that is, and as we've discussed on other podcasts, I mean, crisis comes in a multitude of ways. And we've already discussed things like sickness or trauma or
Hmm.
separation, divorce, all these different things. Job loss is one of them. And when we reflect on who we are as children of God and act in ways that demonstrate that we trust God in the whole process. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. And I had these 7 ways that I just wanted to share. And they're very simple and they are very practical but prayerful too for somebody who's listening that might think, well, I lost my job or I'm in transition and I just don't even know the first steps of what to do. So these are just some simple ways I want to share. One is, and there's 7 ways, by the way, is praying for guidance and openness and asking God to direct your search and clarify your next steps. Second is to update your resume and online profiles, highlighting skills, achievements, and transferable experience. 3 is to activate your network, letting trusted friends, former colleagues, and parish contacts know that you're seeking work. I think that's an important one, by the way. Next is to set a daily job search routine, treating the search with structure, discipline, and purpose. And then fifth is be open to interim or flexible work, such as part time, contract, or temporary roles that build momentum. Sixth is to pursue skill building opportunities, including short courses or certifications that strengthen employability. And 7, which is very prayerful, is to trust God's timing while taking action, combining steady effort with faith and perseverance. Carlos, I just wondered what you thought of those. I like the fact that these ideas are both practical and prayerful because when it comes down to it, it's a spiritual battle, but it is also a battle that has to be taken step by step for the next places in our lives. What does God will for our lives? Where are we to go? Because our jobs are places that we spend a lot of time, aren't they? And
Yeah.
when that changes in our lives, it can be traumatic. So I didn't know what your thoughts were
Yeah.
there.
I really, really, really appreciate that list. It's interesting because God, it was bringing back so many memories for me from my first teaching interview to even my most recent interview. Um, I think that it's very important to be prayerful and practical because sometimes I think ambition can be a distraction, but at the same time, I think it's important because I think that we have to realize that my father was a teacher, for example, and he had every class, every credential you could possibly imagine. And he used to tell me when I was still in school, he said, no matter how many courses you take, um, you're going to walk in that first day and you're not going to know what you're doing. And I think a lot of people have attested to that. Like they say, in a lot of ways, they didn't feel qualified for a certain job, and you just have to go for it because in a lot of ways, especially if you're a parent, you have to provide for your family. My first college job, for example, I remember, I don't know, to this day, and I don't know why they hired me, but it was for an ethics philosophy teacher, which I did okay with the courses rather, but it was like, okay, so the ethics philosophy part, it's like, okay, I was kind of familiar with that. And then they had me teach in medical ethics class a few times, and I'm like, okay. And so there were certain days like maybe I felt like I was just a hair ahead of the students because I was preparing for the classes, obviously. But I just went in there saying, let's just roll with it and go with it and do the best I can. And the students seemed pleased with it. But it's just I got to the point where I certainly felt better about it. But I also felt like I have to figure this out because again, I have my family. I do think we need to understand too that when we're jobless, because sometimes, where you talked about your coworkers, and we also talk about we identify with our work. I mean, just the other day we had someone come to my house that was tuning our piano, and we were talking to him a little bit, and my wife and I were telling him that we're both educators, and I said, yeah, we're educators. This is what we do. And when you're between jobs or whatever, we might feel less valuable, if you will. Maybe like from my point of view, it's like maybe I don't feel like as much of as a man because I'm not, you know, I don't have the means to provide. So we have to remember that it doesn't take away our dignity. But at the same time, I think we need to sometimes remind ourselves what we can do. Like, don't be afraid to have confidence in what you can do. So, a couple things I'd like to share was I remember my first teaching interview, I was scared because I knew they were going to bring up the fact that I had no teaching experience. And I decided I was driving, I had about 30 miles to go. The school was a little ways from where I lived. And I decided, you know what, I'm gonna be a little bold, but I'll be respectful. So the principal, when he asked me, he said, okay, you don't have any experience, you're out of college, why should I hire you? And I asked him, I said, well, I'm sure you were a teacher before you were a principal. He said, of course. He goes, I taught for 10 years. I said, okay, and you had a first day. Someone gave you a chance. I said, I would like to ask you for that same opportunity. And he was very impressed by that. And that was part of what made him hire me. And then even the most recent interview when I had to speak to the group to come return to South Point, it was not I wasn't nervous or anything because I knew half the people in the room already. But one thing that I was able to say, it was, and this is, I wasn't unhappy with the other place or anything, but it was just you can feel when it's time to move on. I was, I shared, again, here's my background, here's what I can do, here's what I can bring to the school. But I also looked the people in the eye that did not know me. And I said, I know I'm already part of the legacy here because I was here for 10 years and there were students who have graduated that I was one of their teachers. So I'm already part of the school's legacy, even if I don't return. I go, but I will admit, walking into this building, I haven't been here since I left. I really miss this place. I really miss all the great things that exist about this school. And if the opportunity is there, I would love the chance to return. So I was not afraid to just reveal in the first case, what I was thinking in terms of, I want the chance to be a teacher. And in the second chance to say, look, I never forgot this place and I would love to come back. And I think, I still hear stories of, we hear about job searching now online and it's really different than when we were younger. But, and you get a chance to talk to someone. Because I've always found, whether it's in teaching, when my music, now the acting is like when I get the chance to talk to the person who's in charge of the project, and you get to talk to them and sort of tell them who you are and what you can do. We're people, we're human beings. That is the communal aspect of who we are because the Trinity is a community. So that's still who we are as people. So when you get that and see who you are, I think that really helps a lot with whether it's a person that's interviewing you or like you were saying earlier about letting people know that you're looking for a job. There's people out there who know your work ethic and your character, and they're happy to refer you for work. 'Cause they may know someone, they spread the word, and that's still how a lot of people today get work.
Oh, 100%. And thank you again for sharing. You've had such great experiences, and I love the way that you kept that contact for your current job now. And I think that goes a long
Yeah,
way to our audience to tell them that, every contact that you've ever made in your past, especially if you're still in touch with them in even some small way, or there's someone
yeah,
that knows your character. So I think that makes a huge difference. Years and years ago, when I was in my 20s, I was in transition, and I decided to go to a career consulting organization for help. And part of that experience was actually a lot of learning about what it takes to find good work, to find the right position. And I had to do a lot of research too. And believe it or not, this is way before the internet. This was early 90s. I was
Yeah.
in my 20s and life was different back then. But one of the core things that I learned about career is that, like you just said, and you made a very good point, telling your relatives and your friends and your contacts is a very important part of that because they know, you have a group of people that you might know. Maybe I'm just going to throw a number out. We all maybe have, I'll say, we could have 50 real close contacts and maybe 100, 100 more than that or 200 more than that are, and many more that are just acquaintances, right? So, I mean, the number there is a variable. It could be different for everyone, how many people we know, right? Relatives and friends.
Yeah.
But the point of it is that with each relative, friend, neighbor, former coworker, they have their own network of people. So when you let
Hmm.
them know, they might know in their network of 100 or 200 or 500 people or whatever that is. That's the best way to let others know that you're available for work. I remember years ago when it was the days of like looking things up in the newspaper ads. We're way beyond
Yeah.
that now, right? But I mean, uh, cold calls are harder than people that know you at least a little bit. So that would be my best advice to somebody who's listening. Practical advice, right? Not maybe not spiritual or
Yeah.
pastoral advice, but just practical advice is that don't be afraid to let those people know that, you know what, I am looking for work, right? To let them know you
Hmm.
are looking for something. And something else that I just kind of came up with, another little paragraph that I have here is that during job loss, keep faith by staying rooted in prayer and the sacraments, trusting that God's providence is at work even when the path feels uncertain. Remember that your worth is not defined by employment, but by being a beloved child of God, and that this season can become a doorway to renewed purpose and hope. So, didn't know if you had any thoughts on that because it really is a time of purpose.
Yeah. I do. We, we struggle with everything. I mean, like there was I wanted to, this is from a music interview I recently saw on YouTube with Frank Zappa of all people, where they asked, this is from like 30 years ago before he passed away, obviously, and they asked him, what advice would you give to young musicians? He said, one, keep going, and two, when you get to where you want to be in life as a musician, it's still hard. Like my wife is really good at saying, well, we're supposed to work hard. That's what you do in life. Even when you get to, if you're the CEO of a multi-billion dollar company, it's still going to be hard. So but I think we should not be afraid of that. I think that's something that we have to realize. And um I one thing I would say is that I learned in college that because obviously before I started teaching, I didn't have any experience, so my references, for example, were some of my college professors because they were willing to go to bat for me because I would take time to sometimes go to see them during their office hours to just learn more. But I would also ask them questions about teaching, like, not just the content, but, being a teacher. So they saw that enthusiasm I had. And so today, for example, like when I mentor young teachers, I can't believe I'm saying that now, but I actually am sometimes. Sometimes they've come to me with questions like, I'm thinking of moving on, and they'll kind of give me the situation. I'm like, yeah, I think the opportunity ahead of you, I think that might be what's best for you. So if there's anything you need, sometimes I've had people call me as a reference for someone and I went to bat for them. Or, I've referred people to for work as well, or just saying, hey, let me pray for you. Because I remember one of the sermons I recently heard from our parish priest was he said, if you can't give, say, a homeless person some money, because I mean that's one of the big things now with the debit card eras. I don't have cash on me. He said, pray for them. I was like, we don't think about that, so you definitely will do that. But one other thing I'd like to do, I wanted to jump back to something you had brought up. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but you had mentioned sort of like a t one of the things I'm seeing a lot today, especially with young people, is people talk about how they don't want to work or they don't want certain jobs. Okay, we've all been we've all been there. I can think of jobs I had in my college years, and I mean, it was hard. I mean, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I mean, I worked part-time during the week, and on the weekends I usually had to do, an 8-hour shift on a Saturday and an 8-hour shift on a Sunday. I wanted to do, but I was proud of the fact that I was working. I was earning money. I was able to, put gas in my car. I was paying for my education. I was, just even if I was buying clothes that I had to wear to work, it was or paying for my car maintenance or Um, I had other college fees or, I was giving my parents money. I was living at home, but I would give them money for part of the bills because I mean, I'm not 12 anymore. I mean, I'm an adult, so I would give them money sometimes. That felt good. I like to remind people that we all contribute to our world that we live in. And while there were certainly jobs I didn't really care for, and when that last day came and I was able to move on to something else, I was certainly happy, but I was also grateful because I had the other opportunity. And you don't want to throw any shade on that job. You had a chance to work. I mean, you were still earning money. So I would say, don't be afraid, excuse me, don't be afraid to work. And the thing that too is like you were mentioning earlier, the network of people. Um, my recent, returning to my job recently, I texted some former coworkers and they went to bat for me. I mean, they were like, "Hey, yeah, we'll put in a good word for you." So that was good too. But also, even those college jobs where part-time jobs, I'm not in touch with anyone I used to work with and haven't been for decades now. But just some of the points you brought up, it brought back a lot of memories. And I remember, I did, I befriended a lot of great people then. We worked together as a team, which was great. And but also those moments where you can talk to them and get to know them. And there was because people come in and out of your life. So sometimes they might be people that we might have, socialized outside of work. And we had, a good time. Sometimes there were conversations in at work or outside of work about faith. And like I said, you were bringing back all these memories. One of the jobs that I remember I wasn't particularly fond of, it was interesting because I remember I would be driving to work and I had a rosary in my car. And a lot of times I would pray the rosary on the way to work. Just it was just what I guess Catholics are supposed to do. But all this conversation is bringing all that back, and I'm remembering the human relationships, the faith journey that went with that, and just the gratitude I had for being able to work. I mean, I've always, throughout my marriage, I mean, I've been married 20, over 28 years. I mean, I've never been afraid to work. When I pray, I ask God for the opportunity. Can you please provide the opportunity for me to earn the money that I need to earn for my family? I mean, obviously, anytime someone helps you out, God bless them, you're grateful for that. But I'm not afraid to ask for just simply the opportunity. So sometimes that's what we need to take to prayer, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I love your reflections, and especially what you just said at the end. This might sound, kind of funny to hear, but I think one of the biggest things in any type of career search, job search, or opportunity is not to be afraid to ask. You
Hmm.
just don't know where that could lead. So I really believe that fully. And I
Hmm.
also believe what you said about sometimes there are times in our lives where we do jobs that they might not be exactly our dream job. I mean, I remember when I was in college and I was student teaching because my original bachelor's degree was in teaching, which I did do for a little
Hmm.
while. And I was cleaning houses, and I did that because I couldn't find a job that fit the exact hours that I needed because I was also student teaching, right?
Hmm.
And not making money doing that. So you do things that you have to do in order to kind of get by sometimes. And then eventually, in God's time and in God's providence, the right job comes along, the right career. So, but it does take time and perseverance and prayer and continuing on the journey every single day. But yeah.
I would love to mention that one of my jobs in college for about 6 months, I did custodial work. And one of the nice things when I returned to my school is, I'm in the same patio I used to teach in. So the custodians that work in that patio, they're still there. And when
Mm.
they saw me, they recognized me because, we were coworkers for 10 years. I mean, hey, it's nice to see you again. But I tell my students that because, again, don't be ashamed of what you're doing. And two, to remind them, look, you guys need to clean up after yourselves because I've done this work and I know they're not just here to clean up after you. They have things they have to do every day. And when they have to clean up after you, that interrupts their work schedule. So, and I know that from experience. And I also know how hard, I mean, John Paul II had done some laborious work as well when he was, an adult, and that's what inspired him to, he was such an advocate for workers and social justice. And to tie it back to our Blessed Mother, when I was mentioning, Joseph and the carpenters would have, they had to, there were times they weren't in the shop. They had to go work elsewhere. Joseph and Jesus would have to ask for work. They'd have to ask, do you know of a job, or if they were talking to other people, letting them know, well, I can do this kind of work. I mean, there were times I'm sure that they or guidance and for that opportunity as well. So, and I'm sure our Blessed Mother, and that's the other thing too, the family members, we know from her heart she would have been supportive and, you know, um, reminding him she believes in him and God will take care of us and probably help soothe his for him to know that she believed in him and had faith in him. And of course, they knew God would also guide them. That was very important, I'm sure, for their marriage.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for, again, for those great reflections as always. I just think that this podcast has been great because we've covered so much. We've covered not only the practical side, right? But
Hmm.
also the prayerful side. I mean, we're people of faith, and that's what this podcast is all about. It's what the foundation is all about. I want to just make that shout out to our listeners, as I always do on every podcast, that one of the greatest offerings that we have as a foundation is our free priestly consultations. You can have either a phone call, a Google Meet meeting, or even in person if you're in one of our areas, primarily the Philadelphia area, if you'd like an in person meeting. But please reach out to us. Our website is nonatus.org, and there is a drop down under our services where you can schedule that free appointment. We also have free prayer line, a free confidential prayer line that you can email us prayer intentions, which we take very seriously. We'll pray for you with this particular prayer request that you have about employment. So reach out to us. And Carlos, I just want to thank you again for joining us on this podcast as my co host and wanted to ask you if you had any final words for our audience.
Just simply, if you're struggling with employment, don't give up. I mean, we've all been there. We know how it's very uncomfortable. So, but don't give up. Pray and realize that, especially the Holy Family, that they've been there. And, Jesus, maybe as a child, may not have been fully aware of what was going on, but certainly he was later in life. And he, of course, having been an adult that had to provide for himself, and of course, especially during his ministry, when they did for others, he didn't just feed 5,000 people daily. That was a specific miracle. But I mean, we know from his heart he would have done for others besides the miraculous. And our Blessed Mother has lived through that. And so they know what we're feeling, and we just need to offer that up. And in time, we will we will find where we need to be. And we have to remember sometimes that the struggle that we went be the anchor for someone else when they realize, okay, someone else knows what I've gone through because they've also gone through that. So there's a lot of different experiences in life we suffer through that, later on we realize it helps someone else endure their struggle. And in this case, we're talking about employment or loss of employment.
Amen. Thank you so much, Carlos. And I'm
You're
looking
welcome.
forward
Thank
to
you.
our other topics. The next topic we have for next month, we're always the first Tuesday of every month on both our YouTube channel and also on SoundCloud. We're called Philly Nonatus. And the next topic will be those who are caretakers for others, health caretakers, whether it be you with your parents or your child or a friend, and how that can be stressful for people sometimes. So I'm looking forward to that one. Please do like and subscribe to our channel. And again, Carlos, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. We'll see all of you here next time with the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. God bless.